let me start with Yemi Adamolekun. Yemi, you are the champion of democracy, civil rights activist. What do you make of what is going on in the United States and President Trump staging an insurrection against the hallowed chambers of democracy?
Happy New Year, Dr. Abati.
Yes, same to you. We missed you. Good to see you.
Happy New Year. And Modeli. It's been quite interesting to see. But ultimately, I think the lesson all of us should take away is that democracy anywhere in the world is hard. So either, as the ambassador says, Nigeria's 30 years or America's 200 plus years. It's just it's a reminder. Democracy or anything really that you work at you consistently have to work at it. The Bible says very clearly that the heart of man is desperately wicked. So if you give people free rein to do as they please and don't check them and let them think that what they're doing is okay, people will continue to take liberties. And America or Nigeria, it can happen anywhere. So it was quite fascinating really to watch. And some of the issues that you raised when talking to the ambassador, I definitely think the response of the security agencies reflected the racist undertones that the Black Lives Matter protest highlighted. And I think it says a lot that a lot of Trump supporters didn't see that. They just kept saying, oh, it was a protest, freedom of speech protest that went out of control, quote and unquote. It's not the actions of the rioters that went out of control. It's the fact that you knew the rioters were coming, or the protesters, let me not even call them rioters. You knew the protesters were coming. You knew that the president had given them marching orders on Capitol Hill, but there was no preparation to deal with that. Meanwhile, Black Lives Matter, there was a full-on ready battalion waiting for them wherever they went. In Oregon, for example, it got really bad with paramilitary, people being tear gassed and shot. So I think for me, that image in itself says a lot. There was a video that was circulating that showed President Trump, his daughter, his son, at sort of a control room watching when the protest first started, when they had congregated in DC before they started marching to Capitol Hill. And so for a certain president to be actively instigating citizens and continuing lying about the result of an election that everybody watched was also quite interesting. And then the role of the evangelical church, I think it's also been very interesting seeing a lot fewer pastors speaking about the role that they played in also the insurrection. Because when you pitch the political parties as good versus evil, you in a sense give a moral justification to why people can fight against the evil that is the Democratic Party and the fact that elections were stolen. And then lastly, social media companies. I think something that Facebook, for example, should have done or could have done a long time, did not do. Finally, sort of realizing that, yes, you're president, but you are overstepping, you are literally lying. Twitter, for example, did that much earlier in flagging the president's tweets and saying there's no basis for this thing. This is not accurate, until they finally decided that they were going to take him off. So a lot of lessons, not just for America, but also for the rest of us who practice a democracy.
Well, thank you, Yemi. Chike Ogea, Yemi has drawn attention to another dimension of it, which is the response of big tech. Twitter, for example, has banned President Trump from Twitter. He moved to another application. Google moved ahead to ban that particular application because the owners of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook insist that their platform cannot be used to promote falsehood. But what's your take generally? I know you won't be surprised. You've been very critical of President Trump.
Well, it was a defining moment, if you asked me, because what we saw, where there was this assault, despicable as it was, on the bastion of American democracy, the citadel of democracy, of what is supposed to be the poster boy for democracy all over the world. And we actually saw the place being attacked in such a brutal manner. And at some point, I thought I was actually, dreaming or something. And why was all this? Because we had a demagogue, as a president, someone who is variously referred to as a narcissistic sociopath, someone who cannot play a game where there are two sides. As far as he's concerned, his only side is the only side, and he cannot even handle the fact that he lost this election. He has done everything he should do within the law. He has used up the judicial process. Even judges he appointed have thrown away all the spurious cases he's been taking to court. They found them vexatious and frivolous. And he goes on with that rhetoric of this election was stolen, this election was stolen. And we know what he has done basically is to whip up, the white supremacist tendencies in America. And that really, for me, is where the real issues are. It's not more about Trump. Like I noticed one of the questions you asked the ambassador, which was one of the things I really picked up, is what happens to the Republican Party after Trump is gone? Because as far as I'm concerned, the Republican Party has to take back their party. They have to get that man out of the way. And that is why it is important that he more or less be impeached, whichever way you think about it. Because, I saw on WhatsApp or something, it says, how can you trust a man with the nuclear code of the world in the last 10, 12 days that has behaved in the manner he has behaved? He actually attacked, he sent terrorists, whether you call them domestic, you call them whatever, terrorists are terrorists, and he sent terrorists to the Capitol Hill. That, I think, is unbelievable. So what I think is that this man will have to definitely be gotten out of the way, far away from that party. He can now go and start his own party after this is all over, because 70-something odd million people that he has resurrected that think like him, they are the issue. It's not about Trump. And they will always want something to express that vent. They will always want to vent that sentiment of theirs. So the Republican Party, I think, should go and rebuild itself along the noble lines of American democracy, the conservatives, while the Democrats will remain as they are. And then this third aspect of what, because that's what democracy is all about, this third sentiment of what Trump has just wept up, this monster he has awoken in America, can then find his own space. If you ask me, that's what I think. But coming directly to your question, I think it's a wonderful thing, because we know that the world as it is today, technology has such a great role to play. In fact, if you ask me, Trump didn't need any spokesman or anything. He was practically sending out all his policies, and every major announcement he has, he just had to tweet. And he was reaching his 88 million odd supporters all over the place. So definitely that is the best way to inhibit him, especially if these things that have been proven to be lies. The fact that he's the president of America cannot give him that right to keep feeding, his supporters with lies and lies upon lies. So I think it is good what Facebook is doing, what Instagram is doing, and what Twitter is doing. They should get this man is dangerous, not just to America, but to the entire world.
Yes, quite correct. Professor Akintenwa, I'd like to have your take. I know you are not a fan of Trump either.
You did ask Ambassador Okpelo 7 questions, and he provided 7 critical issues as well. But 2 of them are quite noteworthy. The first one is that democracy should be nurtured, that it could not just be taken for granted. I wouldn't insist on that, since I agree that, look, there is the need to evolve a democratic culture. The second one is this after me, the deluge. It's a critical expression in international relations, which has its origin in this French politics. Après-moi, le déluge. Now, I think that the situation in the US, the terrorism a la Donald Trump clearly shows that there will never be a premier le deluge. Because this time, as I once raised the issue here, the real challenge actually is who will provide political asylum for Donald Trump. Because as it is, I had the opportunity to have argued many years back that the United States is the terra cognita for the most terrible terrorists in the world. The most dangerous terrorists, they are American-based. They are there. And a manifestation of what happened on the Capitol Hill is surely what we have seen, that, look, the challenge in the future is how Joe Biden will be able to contain the most likely terrorism that will be displayed, you know, in intra-American politics in the future. It is very good, very interesting to have Joe Biden say, and some other Americans say, that Americans will be unified. Where is the reunification? You have people who are already bent, they have their mentality. And in this case, we talk about 70 million Americans voting for Donald Trump, as opposed to 78 million voting for Joe Biden. America is sharply divided. So when you talk about unification, unification of what? Is it mentality? Is it the philosophy? Is it the belief? Now, the issue is that we are likely to have a situation according to which Donald Trump, if allowed to exist as it is, to grow, you know, the narcissism, racialism, all manners of indecent civilizations. That's the embodiment of Donald Trump. So in this case, I think, like Ambassador Okpelo tried to suggest, that Nigeria should cultivate a sort of rapprochement with Joe Biden. Okay, it's quite good. But in this case, U.S. foreign policy essentially will not change. It is only the tactics adopted by Donald Trump that will be different from Joe Biden's.
Well, Prof, sorry to cut in here. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we return, our conversation around the insurrection in the United States on January 6th will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bulitag Center for Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information Delta State, and Arise News Analyst Modele Sharafa Yusuf. Well, Prof, before we went on break, you addressed a number of questions. And I'm interested in the point you were making that who will grant President Trump asylum? Well, what we know is that Iran has declared President Trump wanted. He's been accused of the killing of General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020, right? And then, of course, other countries have announced what looks like some sanctions. Scotland, for example, says, look, if he's not going for the inauguration on January 20, he should just stay away from Scotland. He shouldn't come there to play golf. But do you see the possibility of any African country supporting President Trump? If it comes to that, I don't imagine that will happen.
Africa as a country, as a continent, and as a people. Considered as a continent in terms of the African Union, for instance, it may be very difficult because trying to do so will necessarily create problems of relationship with the new administration. As a people, we are most likely to have the Christians, for instance. Is the Christians who did agree with Donald Trump in the belief that, look, the movement of the embassy of the United States from, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, in the belief that, look, the Christians actually have the right to Jerusalem, contrary to the internationally agreed principle that there must be a homeland for the Palestinians as well as for the Jews, for the Israelis. So they now think that Donald Trump is a good Christian, that is a good person, but they do not know that Donald Trump is simply wearing the outlook, the garment of a Christian, but with a satanic blood flowing in his system. So you see, this is the issue. If you now ask me who are the countries in Africa that are most likely to welcome him, I would say no African country, because Donald Trump is another satanic agent in international relations, and nobody will want to hobnob with him. But the Christians, on the basis of misinformation, misunderstanding, misrepresentation of the situational facts on ground, they may want to play host. In Nigeria, for instance, we have those asking for secession in Nigeria, IPOB, MASOB, all along. They wrote letters to Donald Trump in the belief that he's most likely to support their secessionist tendency. So if you look at it at the level of the people, we can have pockets of people who are most likely to want to accommodate him, but it cannot be publicly done at the end of the day. If not, it will be very detrimental to their interests.
Modele, let me come to you. I mean, all the issues have been raised, but I would like you to maybe also touch on one aspect of it. About the same time that all of this was happening, the Democrats, they won the runoff elections in Georgia with Raphael Warnock, Reverend, and John Ossoff winning and beating the Republican candidates. How significant is this for the Democrats? And then what's your view, what's your assessment of what has happened so far in the United States? Do you think Trump has been able to achieve a part of his objective, which is to discredit Biden's victory and to delegitimize it? Do you get the impression that anybody thinks that Trump's victory, few days after the ratification by Congress, is not legitimate?
Has Trump achieved his aim? Yes, he has. What happened on Capitol Hill on Wednesday clearly shows that a lot of people now believe, about 70 million Americans, at least 70 million Americans who voted, now believe that Biden's win was illegitimate. So to that extent, I think he achieved his aim. As President-elect Biden said, I wish we could say that we didn't see this coming. So when people say, I'm really surprised that it happened, how could this have happened? I said, we're really surprised, because I was watching it unfold, and I wasn't surprised. I was amused. I was disturbed. But I was not surprised that it happened, because you could see everything building towards what happened on the day. Somebody said this was just a protest. Some people have tried to say this is not insurrection, but insurrection is an armed protest, even though it's in a limited form. And that's exactly what happened against a constituted authority. Armed protest against constituted authority is how you define insurrection. So clearly, this was insurrection in the United States. And to that extent, I was disturbed. The bastion of democracy. And this is happening right before our eyes, unfolding in real time. We all could see it happening. But I wasn't surprised that it happened. Unfortunately, what happened sort of cast a shadow on the great thing that happened in Georgia. It became a footnote on the day that 2 senators from the Democratic Party managed to win. And if you noticed, it was by the slightest margin that they won the seats to Congress, to the Senate. And that tells me that if it hadn't been, if you also notice, this victory it was slightly better. The results were slightly better than what happened during the presidential elections, which means that more people were waking up. So it was also significant. The blacks went out to vote en masse. They were mobilized. They went out to vote, and people came from out of state who ordinarily had asked for their for absentee ballots to be sent to them. When they didn't get it, they actually flew in to make sure that their voices were heard. So it is significant to that extent that black people are now taking this seriously. And now the Senate is split 50-50 with Vice President Kamala Harris being able to cast the deciding vote. So it makes things easier for the incoming administration to push their agenda to get things done, for which reason it was a very significant thing that happened in Georgia.
Although by the rules of cloture, there would need to be a lot of filibustering, because for you to be able to wrap up a particular piece of legislation, you will need at least 60 to 50. But it's important that the people of the state of Georgia reacted against all the efforts by President Trump to impose his will on them. And I believe that the phone call to Raffensperger, the Secretary of State for Georgia, may have done a lot of damage. And for me personally, it was quite exciting to see John Ossoff, 33-year-old John Ossoff, after winning, recording a video in which he acknowledged the help that he received from Nigerians particularly. I mean, a couple of the names that he mentioned, I remember those persons, very clearly. And then he talked about West Africans in diaspora who are in the state of Georgia, and he supported them to campaign. And isn't that the Nigerian spirit? Nigerians are incapable of just standing by the sidelines where politics is to be played, and they have a voice and they have the opportunity to make a difference. Yemi, let me come back to you. What do you think of Nigerians' involvement? And maybe also you want to comment briefly on the role played by Stacey Abrams.
Right. Before then, let's just comment on what Ms. Bodeli said around the number of people that voted. So, yeah, over 70 million people voted for Trump, but definitely not all of them think that Biden's election was rigged or stolen or whatever the word is. I would hazard a guess that they're a minority of that number, but they are a significant enough minority that then speaks to what Prof was talking about around the prospects for the president-elect in terms of unity, quote and unquote, and what that looks like. People have been arrested from the Capitol Hill incident. People will be prosecuted. People will go to jail. There are the people who voted for Trump. What space do they think they have, not only in Biden-led administration, but in today's America, so to speak? And if you watch platforms that are quite pro-Trump, sort of the language around what this means, the phrasing or framing that's also class-related. So talking about how this is almost an internal Republican. So there's an element that's internal to the Republican Party of rich white privilege versus poor white Trump supporters, and what that means, and then what it means sort of in larger American society. Now to Georgia, quite exciting. It was a slim victory. It wasn't like it was a landslide by any stretch of imagination, but at least it was a victory that is significant in its outcomes, so to speak. Stacey Abrams and the others that worked on really connecting people's votes, and that's one of the lessons for Nigeria, in the sense that there is a lot of hard getting or helping people connect the power of their votes to things that matter to them. So in the Nigerian context, connecting voting to access to education, access to healthcare, access to roads that work, access to support for businesses, access to electricity. Those things are not, they're not rocket science, also hard work. They're to get out and let them know. So Stacey Abrahams and her team did that and see the results. And again, Nigerians in the diaspora, we are very, what's the word? I think it's interesting to both sides. You have Nigerians who are Republicans, you have Nigerians who are Democrats. And in this particular case, not surprising, a lot of Nigerians live in Georgia, in Atlanta and its suburbs. So not surprising that they decided to put their money where their mouth is.
Well, thank you very much, Yemi Adamolekun. Let's move to the next topic. President Muhamadu Buhari, Vice President Yemi Osunbajo, and the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustapha, will be among the first set of Nigerians to be administered with COVID-19 vaccines when the country takes delivery of the first batch by the end of the month. Their vaccination will be televised to inspire public confidence in the safety of the vaccines. Nigeria is hoping to get 42 million COVID-19 vaccines to cover 1/5 of its population through the Global COVAX scheme. The initial vaccines would come as part of Nigeria's plan to inoculate 40% of its population this year and another 30% in 2022, with shipment of 100,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine due to arrive by the end of the month. Well, Chike, I would like to start with you on this one. The Nigerian government has been very proactive, I would say, since the beginning of the year, particularly against the background of the disclosure that we now have a second variant of COVID-19 in Nigeria, and the concern expressed by Nigerians and other stakeholders about what we're doing to be part of the COVID-19 race. We're expecting by the end of the month 100,000 COVID vaccines, which will be taken first by those Dr. Faisal Shaibu, the head of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, those he describes as strategic national leadership. And his argument is that that's to build trust, to inspire confidence, to check the threat of vaccine hesitancy. But many Nigerians say no, they do not agree. That is the people that should first be administered with COVID-19 vaccines, and that we need more details as to what Nigeria is going to get beyond participation in the COVAX-Gavi Alliance scheme. However, government insists that they're talking to Pfizer, and WHO has approved the Pfizer vaccine for Nigeria. Government also says we're talking to the Chinese. That's about much that we know so far.
Well, one thing is for sure, Ruben, and that is that the variant of this second wave is vicious and is deadly and is swift. In the last 1 week, 2021 is barely 8-9 days or 10 days. I think people I know personally, not public figures or whatever, people I have had relationships, interpersonal relationships as friends, people I was in clubs with and all that kind of thing. I must have lost 12 people that I know over this time. So what I'm trying to say is that this new wave, I think, is terrible, and I think everything that the Nigerian government can do, including if it has to impose another lockdown, whether we like it or not, because for me, it is life before livelihood. Yes, I know we have all these daily workers and all of that, but when you see the kind of irresponsible behavior some Nigerians have been putting up in the past couple of days, where it took the police commissioner of Lagos himself to go around nightclubs in Lagos, arresting so many youths. I was horrified when I saw that. But that seems to be what, that is how important we take this thing. We become skeptical of our leaders in Nigeria. Why? Because, You don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that there has been a grand leadership failure in the country over the years. It's not even just about the government in place today, though the government today is particularly clueless. But even before then, they said the one before was clueless, and then maybe this is even more clueless. I don't know. But the truth is that everywhere in the world, you need leadership to inspire its people. And one of the ways leadership can do that is by showing its people, look, there is a great narrative out there that this vaccine is coming to kill people. Don't take it. I've seen the quality of people I've heard talk like that. Meanwhile, this vaccine might be the only way for the survival of mankind, not just Nigeria. So the truth is that, yes, it will be important, for the leadership, the president, the vice president, whoever, let them take it, let them televise it, let people see it. Let them see that nobody is going to die. But more importantly, let them make it available for the people of Nigeria, as many as possible. Let us go ahead and do whatever we can do to ramp up our storage facilities, our cold room facilities, so we can be able to keep these vaccines and get them to be as potent as ever, and make sure that they work for our people. Because like I said earlier on, Ruben, this particular wave seems to be deadly. It kills within days. You might be I've heard situations where someone was totally asymptomatic. He felt no symptoms of anything. And from the first headache or whatever he felt, all it took was 72 hours and he was gone. And we lack the level of care that we need. I don't know what happened to all those massive COVID initiatives that built all those big tents all over the country. Apparently, they have all been dismantled because the first wave was over. And, now we are hopelessly short of, both supplies, medical personnel, and places to treat patients. And I'm just praying and saying that, you remember when what Bill Gates and the wife said long ago, that we're all saying shame on you, it didn't happen in Nigeria and all that. Is it about to happen? What are we about to see now? So I believe that everything the government should do, and please, we need these vaccines like yesterday in Nigeria.
Well, Modele, let me come to you. Very early in the year, Dr. Onya of Pelon Memorial Hospital in Ikeja had to issue a statement titled "The COVID Tsunami," and warned that hospital facilities are overwhelmed and that Nigeria is becoming another Lombardy, not France, where France has recorded very frightening figures. And she was appealing to Nigerians not to think that this thing called COVID is a joke. We have also had other people who have had the experience of COVID-19, like Alibaba, GCFR. He said he was done with COVID. He has issued statements saying anybody who says COVID does not exist is a fool. Where in Alibaba's case, they may think it's a joke.
I'm on the television.
They may think it's another comedy skit from Alibaba, but he has had to repeat it to say this is not a joke. He knows what he's talking about because he's been through it. And yet you see astonishing suicidal behavior on the part of Nigerians. Around Christmas, Elegushi Beach was overcrowded.
Wasn't only Elegushi.
Overnight, Akim Odumusu, Chike Ogea referred to, he led a team to a nightclub in VI, another nightclub in Ikeja, and arrested over 243 persons. What else should government do? Just to at least get people to know that they need to keep safe and that they do not have a right to kill themselves or by extension kill others.
I spoke to Professor Folashade, the former acting vice chancellor in the University of Lagos, Folashade Ogunshola, who's a virologist at the height of the first wave. And I asked her, why do you think people are carrying on like there's no problem? And she said, the problem is television. I said, why? She said because when this pandemic struck in Europe, people were dying in droves, and we could see the pictures in Nigeria. So initially, people assumed that it was going to be like that, especially with all of those cautionary tales or cautionary statements by people like Bill Gates. But fortunately, when it didn't happen like that, the first few months, people assumed that there was no problem. So she assumed, I'm inclined to agree with her that that might have been the problem. It didn't happen the first time. Initially, people were in a panic, and then not much happened. A few people died compared to the population of Nigeria. So that is the problem. People have continued to deny the existence of COVID-19, even now, despite this second wave, and the fact that our hospitals are overwhelmed. There aren't enough facilities. Hospitals such as those that you named are charging amounts as high as 10 million naira for people to be treated. For people to be even admitted into hospital, they're charging as much as 10 million naira. So when demand outstrips supply, this is what happens. So the number of people that need to go into hospitals is increasing. The facilities are not there. There isn't even enough oxygen. People have died because of lack of oxygen. So even the basics are not there. And for me, the most disheartening is the fact that government is not even saying enough to sensitize people to the fact that this is a problem. I know that the biggest problem is the reluctance to lock down again. Nigeria clearly can't afford a lockdown. So it seems to me, even though that hasn't been said, it seems to me that government is saying, well, this is your problem, deal with it. If you're careful and you don't get caught up in the COVID-19 net, good for you. If you do, well, good luck to you. We've been left to our devices. Nigerians have been left to their devices. Government clearly cannot afford a lockdown. The chaos that ensued during the first wave is enough to show us that that is the case. Palliatives were not distributed. Palliatives were not enough. It didn't get to the right people. People who are earning daily pay were on rampage. They would rather die by COVID than die by hunger. So, people are just carrying on. Are they suicidal? Yes. I mean, because clearly this thing is a big problem. It's a killer. Those who know will tell you. But people are just carrying on. They don't seem to... many people don't seem to believe, and I think the reason is because not much happened during the first wave. And another thing is they're beginning to think that this is the problem of rich people. It's only rich people that are dying. Well, they're the ones that we're hearing who are dying. We're not hearing that many people have been treating malaria and treating malaria and treating malaria. Many are asymptomatic. They're not displaying. So people don't really believe that there's COVID-19. But there is. Another thing is the vaccines. We're a country of 200 million people, 200 million plus people. We don't know exactly how many. And only 100,000 doses will be brought in the first instance. Nigeria being what it is, it then becomes a matter of who you know, which is why people are worried that many people want to take the vaccine. A lot more people will probably not want to take the vaccine, which is the reason why polio endured for as long as it did, because people were very skeptical of vaccines, especially in the north. They were very skeptical of vaccines. So now we need government to start telling us. I believe that our leaders should take the vaccines. I believe that they should demonstrate that this is harmless, this will help you, this would help to stop this pandemic. It is good. But then, after that 100,000, by the time they give all the elites, because I have a feeling that it's only the elites that would get that 100,000, given the way that we are, It will become who you know. It will become how important you are. Apart from the president, the vice president, and the governors that should really they should take the vaccines to show that it is safe, it is good for you. But then they should start considering the people on the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, those who work in hospitals, those who work in supermarkets. But then again, how do you determine this? Do we have the data to determine those people who are working on the front lines? The distribution of this vaccine, something tells me it's going to be as chaotic as everything else that is Nigerian. I hope it isn't.
Well, when you consider the fact that the Pfizer vaccine that has been approved for Nigeria requires you to take 2 doses between 3 weeks to 12 weeks, then you see that the 100,000 doses
will be going to 50,000 people.
Very small. It won't even touch the population. But Prof, in the midst of all of this, universities have been asked to reopen. The Nigerian Medical Association says they don't think so. But first, let me take your thoughts on the process with the vaccine so far. For me, one good development is that at least we now have the Primary Healthcare Development Agency speaking up through its Director General. Previously, Dr. Shaibu's name was not part of the conversation.
Well, you see, I have qualms, I have problems with the extent of integrity of the Global Vaccine Alliance Initiative, Gavi, with the Global Access Program, COVAX. Because if you look at the literature, the opinion, the suggestion, the fears of the black people in diaspora, they strongly believe that there are some ulterior motivations surrounding this issue of vaccine. The people believe that there may be a hidden agenda to depopulate, the black people. They have linked this to the suggestions, observations of Bill Gates in 2005. So when we look at this, do we have different categories of vaccines, for instance? One category that will be meant for people who want to keep safe. Then another category of vaccines for the people they want to kill. So we have not been sufficiently educated on this. This fear is there. Secondly, there is this issue of cold temperature for the vaccines. When, for instance, the World Health Organization recommends the Pfizer vaccines for Nigeria and for some other countries, are we being told that, let's say, the 100,000 vaccines which Mandela consider likely not to be adequate, and I will subscribe to observation, will there be the likelihood of having to preserve, to keep, either in the normal fridge, refrigerator, freezer, or the special freezing? Do we have the capacity to keep? At the level of Africa, it is said that, look, the operationalization of this vaccination should actually be expected to take place in the second quarter of 2021. But now we are starting. If we do not have the capacity to refrigerate these vaccines accordingly, why are we placing orders for them? You see, the bottom line, I want to believe that if people believe the leaders of Nigeria or the politicians should first of all take the vaccines. There is the need to let us know the content, all right, of the vaccine itself, so that we'll be able to identify the extent to which there may be danger for the black people. You see, we have a challenge of how to determine the most appropriate, vaccine. Is it the temperature of preservation that you define it, or the content? We are told that our ministers has set up a committee to look at this. We've been told that there will be clinical trials before we take them. Please, this rivalry between Chinese vaccines, American vaccines, European vaccines, may be looked at as a political question, but it is very critical, very, very critical. And I want to suggest that for now, the Nigerian medical practitioners should be fully and thoroughly mobilized to investigate whatever vaccine might have been recommended by the World Health Organization to the people of Nigeria before we take them. Because we are now, strictly speaking, operating in an environment of international politics. If, for instance, if you now look at the new terrorism, political terrorism in the US, if you have a person like Donald Trump, let's assume he's still there, and we are talking about vaccines, a Donald Trump of this world can have a type of vaccine that can preserve the Americans and have another one to kill the Nigerians. So I do not trust anyone when it comes to this issue of vaccination. Well, there is the need to be very careful.
Well, Prof, part of the conversation, many Nigerians are saying that it looks like Nigerian leaders have reserved the Pfizer vaccine for themselves, and that they are likely to administer the Chinese vaccine on Nigerians. So they're saying they too are entitled to Pfizer vaccine, that they should not be used to experiment with the Chinese vaccine.
But you see, Ruben,
however, one leg of it that we have seen is that some Nigerian leaders are already going to Dubai to take the jabs.
Correct.
And Nigerians look at this and they say, well, they say it all the time, they are really helpless because only the rich can go to Dubai or elsewhere to take the jab. At this point, let me bring in Yemi Osunbajo. Is there a class dimension to this race for vaccine in Nigeria? Hello, Yemi.
That to sort of focus on. Number one, before we go to vaccines, let's talk about the virus as a starting point. So people say it's the disease of the rich, for example, because obviously, I mean, if the people that you keep hearing in the newspaper that die are politicians, wealthy people, it reinforces itself. But as a friend of mine said, you can't use death to scare people who already see death on a daily basis. Again, I'll use my example during the last lockdown. I joined Lagos State to take palliatives to the elderly in the Ikorodu area. We had a bus of police officers who provided escort services. As we drove into a particular community, some of the area boys, as they call them in the area, came out. They did not carry any weapon except a sling and stones. And when they came out, they were just like, what? That we brought police to scare them. What do we think that we're doing? That they see death every day. So having police and guns does nothing for them, that it doesn't scare them. Mind you, not one police officer, all of them fully armed, came out of their car. Not one of them came out of the car. They sat in the car. And these are young guys that only had slings and stones. In the car that I was sitting in, the ASMA official that was driving was also an APC member, and he knew some of the guys. So he walked out of the car and went to speak to them, calmed them down, said they shouldn't worry, they would also get their own palliatives, blah, 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 blah. And that's how we were able to get out of them. So I use that as an example to say that when you talk about those at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, saying that this disease will kill you is not a deterrent, if I want to use that. So we've talked about shutting down the economy, which I completely agree that it's a non-issue. I don't agree that we should, because it's not worth it. Because the people who are actually being the most irresponsible are the elite. From governors to ministers to people who are sort of prominent people in society, we see the stories of where they might have been, that they might have caught it. As we said, we saw the beach that full. And I use the word elite quite broadly. As I say, if you can listen to me and understand what I'm saying in the Nigerian context, and you can read and write, you're part of Nigeria's elite. As you said, the commissioner of police went to a club and had to arrest people. Some of them were wearing masks, but they were in the club. So obviously, no social distancing of anything was happening. Saw the footage around of Queen's Event Center when it was shut down. Party that happened, which was, I think it was even a Lagos State official's daughter or child that was getting married, for example. So these are the things that are issues. And we do not have the capacity, both from a private perspective, neither do we have it from a public perspective. So yes, if it's costing $1 million or whatever it is at a private hospital for care, remember that the people who are running those facilities are paying for everything. Well, in a government-run facilities, they subsidize for people who don't have to pay those amounts of money. And again, the elite factor as well. People have COVID and they don't want to go to Yaba. They want to go to highbrow hospitals and Lekki and VI, and that comes at a cost. So also, depending on, you have COVID, you want 5-star treatment, you want course meal every meal, you want plush and pillow and whatever it is. So I mean, those considerations, I'm sorry, I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I think we also need to be clear when we're discussing these things, what those parameters are. Look at oxygen, for example. Lagos State has an oxygen shortage. I saw a video footage, the Commissioner of Health, they now able to generate a lot more plants. As a country, the last one that we had in Lagos had to be shut down for security. And then the government now comes out and says we're building oxygen plants in 36 states. How does that make any sense? How does that make any sense? But again, our federal character, what do we do this thing? Every state must be treated equally when we are not equal by any stretch of the imagination. Instead of focusing on oxygen plants in 4 key states, or maybe 1 per geopolitical, make sure it's actually functioning. Sort out the logistics, supply chain that can get to the tools where they need it, so people don't have to. An aunt of mine, in a sense, aunt in the Nigerian sense, not related, her aunt was in a hospital, and the people supplying the oxygen were bringing in half tanks. And she said it was probably, they suspected that it was a racket with the management, so they pay. And so when you have a lot of these elements, again, I say this, it's the people who get to a hospital who have to deal with this thing that we need to speak to ourselves. And the truth of the matter is, in terms of numbers, yes, COVID is not killing, malaria is killing, pneumonia is killing, HIV is killing. It is not. Tuberculosis is killing. It is not. It's not that anybody's trying to play with it. That's the truth. But COVID is a disease where the vaccine is new and there is no known cure. And the side effects are also, don't know what the long-term side effects are. There are people who have had COVID, who have recovered, it's 2-3 months later, they still suddenly feel weak, they're still tired, they're struggling to breathe. So those are the things we need to take into consideration. So yes, the numbers are not there. Because it is a new disease, we must be responsible. And lastly, religious execution. I don't know much about what's happening in mosques. I haven't paid attention, but I will speak to churches. There are churches that I've seen that are quite compliant. If you see, I mean, obviously churches are both physical now and online. You'll see them, they're wearing masks, the chairs are well spaced out. But I was watching a church 2 days ago. The chairs, for example, looked quite close together. I don't know if it makes the measurement, people had their masks on their chin. But when service ended, they basically said, or it's a conference, so they said, reconvene at 4 o'clock or whatever, so you can go and come back if you want to get something to eat. There was no guidance on how to leave. So you put chairs apart. When you get up to go, you don't do anything about social distancing. People's masks are on their chin. Have you not defeated that? And then Winners Chapel, mentioning Winners Chapel specifically being named this morning deliberately, I was watching their service earlier today. Not only was there no social distancing whatsoever, nobody was wearing a mask that I saw on screen. So when you have all these things, so I'm not even blaming at all at this point. That's done quite a bit. However, in organizations and people putting on Instagram stories, WhatsApp stories that they're attending weddings with no mask, when things are being out public domain, what are the consequences? So are the churches being fined? Are people going to weddings and putting them on their Instagram stories?
Well, on that note, Yemi, we need to take a short break now. When we return, this is a live, the Sunday talk show. We continue. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me, I have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and former Director General, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State, and Arise News analyst, Modele Sharafa Yusuf. Well, let's move on to the next topic. The National Universities Commission, NUC, has directed Vice Chancellors of universities to resume their academic activities on January the 18th. The directive was contained in a statement signed by NUC's Deputy Executive Secretary, Chris Meyaki, who stated, and I quote, universities on resumption of academic activities must under no circumstances violate the full cycle of the semester system, consistent with the benchmark minimum academic standards approved by the NUC, as well as other extant quality assurance standards and guidelines. Nigeria's public universities have been closed since March 2020, after the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, embarked on a strike. ASUU suspended the strike on December 23rd, 2020, after the Nigerian government met their demands, including paying the lecturers their outstanding salaries using an older payment platform, GIFMIS, different from the controversial IPs. The NUC, however, advised officers on grade level 12 and below to remain at home for a 5-week period, as earlier directed by the federal government. Well, Prof, let me start with you. You are the university person here. Take along with the directive of the NUC the fact that at the university level, the Nigerian Medical Association, the Nigerian Academy of Science, and also for secondary schools, the National Union of Teachers, all of these groups are saying, given the second variant that is spreading in Nigeria, it will not be wise to reopen universities. Should schools in Nigeria reopen by January 18? Private proprietors who have schools, particularly at the secondary and the primary school level, they say they would like to reopen. But at the higher level, the university teachers do not seem to be so enthusiastic. In fact, they are insisting that government has not really honored the agreements they reached.
Two critical issues. Critical issue number one, if I heard you well, the NUC was quoted as saying, under no circumstance should the university year, be disrupted. If I heard that well, under no circumstance, that statement should be qualified as an overstatement. It's an overconditionality. Why? Because there's a principle of law that when an agreement is done, if the agreement is vitiated by a signatory, then the other signatories can as well capitalize on that vitiation not to comply with the obligations created. In this case, there's an agreement done at the level of the government and the ASUU. If, for instance, the federal government, which is noted for agreement breaching than in respecting, why would you expect the ASUU, the university lecturers, to comply with an agreement that the other party has not shown any determination to respect? That's the first issue. The critical issue, number two, is that you did tell us, and rightly too, that the strike, the walk to rule, began as far back as March 2020. Now we have more than 10 months. Another one now, we have one academic session completely lost. It doesn't show any seriousness of purpose. It does not suggest that the federal government of Nigeria has any focused attention to use education as an instrument of national growth and development. Why will it take you 10 months, one calendar year, to resolve the matters? And when we talk about resolution of the misunderstanding, the dispute, it is not that there has been any concrete, enduring solution that we can really talk about. So in this case, if the NUC is saying on the one hand, yes, you must continue to work in such a way that at least the academic year is not tampered with. That is good. It's a welcome, policy decision. But the environmental conditions, the operational, environment, as you draw our attention to it, is not convenient. We have been told that we were discussing the issue of vaccine the other time. The vaccines that we are going to take now, will they qualify, will they enable the people, all right, to go to school, survive, when we have been told that the new variant of the COVID-19 is completely different? All right? We have been told that this variant is deadlier. It infects more rapidly. The viral load is very heavy. And they are still studying that. The vaccines that are going to be given are largely informed by the first COVID-19. So they are still experimenting. They are still studying the new variant. So does it mean that the existing vaccines will also apply effectively in the context of the new variant? When we apply this to the issue of the fears of the university dons, etc., all along, it's always better to argue, to take decisions on caution. Because as it is, the dead does not go to school. The dead person does not protest. You need to live to be able to come out and argue. If, for instance, as we are told by the scientists, that this new variant of the COVID-19 is more dangerous and we should be more careful, then we should now ask, what would be the basis of an NUC or the federal government saying, go back to school? When children are kidnapped, it's very easy to have empathy for the parents of such kids. But wait and be affected directly then you will now feel the pain differently. In other words, many parents will prefer to have their children alive than saying, go to school. People who do not go to school still survive. Let us deal with, I think it was Shike who told us earlier on, life before livelihood. And I think I subscribe to his school of thought.
Let me take Modely's input on this subject. And don't forget the fact that the Joint Action Council, which is the umbrella body for senior staff associations and the non-academic staff unions in the universities, they have in fact said from this coming week, they are going to embark on warning protests. So if you don't have the non-academic staff and you don't have the senior staff association, how do you get the universities to function? And there's still the unresolved matter of the protests by ASUU that government is being economical with the truth, with the payment of earned allowances.
Before I address that, Ruben, I'd like to first address the issue of resumption of universities and secondary schools as well, and schools generally at the height of a pandemic. It speaks back to what I was saying earlier about government's double speak on not saying anything at all. They're saying, be careful, this pandemic is real, this new mutated variant of COVID-19 is more deadly. It is, well, it spreads more rapidly. At the same time, they're saying, let the schools open. When you know that young people are the ones who are least likely to take those kinds of protocols seriously. They're the ones who are more daring. They're the ones who are more fatalistic. They're the ones who would go to nightclubs. They're the ones who would go to the beach and party all night. They're the ones who, you know, even on a good day when you tell them don't do this, that's exactly what they want to do. So you now have this pandemic raging, and we're all worried at the way it is growing exponentially. And you say these same young people should go to school where you can't keep an eye on them. I'd like to bring to mind something. The NUC called on vice chancellors of universities not to allow any form of academic activities involving large crowds to be organized or hosted on their campuses. Ruben, you've been to all these universities. You see how these classrooms, these lecture theaters are. You see the number of children who attend lectures. Sometimes they're sitting on the floor. Sometimes they're sitting on the floor. They're packed like sardines because there isn't enough room. There aren't enough lecturers to even split the classes. If you want to split the class, for example, you say, okay, you have 1,000 people taking this particular course. Let's split it into, and government says, the protocol, the COVID-19 protocol says, let there not be more than 50% of capacity. Is it possible in our universities? Does that mean the lecturers will take the courses twice? These same lecturers who have been on strike for all of these things, can we afford to pay them extra for them to have classes split into two? Are they willing to make that sacrifice? I don't think so. So what's going to happen? They're going to pack these children into all of these classes like sardines, as they normally do, and then these things will continue to spread among these young children. And some of these people may not even know that they have underlying conditions. Imagine people young people who are asthmatic, and they're thrown into this maelstrom. So I am worried. I also, the fact that private school owners are insisting, are begging, are pleading, are requesting that schools be open. It's an economic thing. It is not necessarily because they want children back in school. It's because the teachers are saying we're not being paid. We're not paid for the whole time that the schools were closed.
Well,
so they want.
Correct. On this note, we need to take a short break. When we return, I will take Chike Ogea and Yemi Adamolekun, and then we'll move on to our final topic of the day. We'll take a short break now. When we return, this day live, the Sunday talk show, we continue. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and former Director General, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information Delta State, and Arise News Analyst, Modele Sharafa Yusuf. Yemi Adamolekun, let me come to you quickly. Schools to reopen in Nigeria by January 18. Does it make sense, given the spread of a second variant of COVID?
Thank you. Quickly, I want to tie it to vaccines because I didn't get to speak about that. The same way that we're trying to do oxygen tanks in 36 states, the breakdown of how the vaccine will be shared is tied to our state population. So a state like Kogi, who said there's no COVID at all in their states, gets based on its population, where states where they've actually had incidents don't make more sense for it to be tied to cases rather than population like we normally share stuff. So Katsina getting vaccines that it likely doesn't need. Anyway, universities and being open. I do agree. I think, as Modele said, if we look at the way our universities are structured, we're not structured to deal with this sort of situation. And I think the conversations that we should be having, which is how are we going to teach? How are we going to manage the large crowds, not only in the classrooms, but also in the dormitories? We know that a lot of dorms are over, whatever the word is, they are full, then you have people squatting. So as university is going to allow that to happen. But those are the conversations that should be happening, not just a blanket, you must resume, you must not do anything in a crowd, and you must make sure you don't compromise the academic year. So unfortunately, again, to Prof's earlier point, shows our lack of seriousness, standing education as a tool for development.
Well, thank you. Chike, quickly, so that we can take our last topic of the day.
Yeah, I think everything that should be said have been said, basically. The only thing that irks my mind is in all of this, knowing what the issues are, knowing where the dangers lie, and having gone through this 10 months debilitating strike by the lecturers and the distortions to our academic system and all of that. And of course, the prevailing COVID situation. Why have steps not been taken, I asked to myself, where these students can start getting a chunk, if not everything yet, or online? Why what are the infrastructure that needs to be put in schools to facilitate this? We just talked about technology in the American elections and all of that now. And everybody knows that the world, it's all about technology. And I think we should start thinking more of that. And that could help us, out of this kind of quagmires we seem to be getting ourselves into, where, like everybody agrees, the importance of education cannot be overstretched. And yet we have situations where, our students are losing one calendar, maybe even two now, going forward, with all what is going on in the world. That's just my take on it.
Well, thank you, Chike. Let's take our final topic of the day, and I'm going to start with you, so just be on standby. President Buhari is assuring Nigerians that the war against Boko Haram in the northeast of the country would end this year, alongside the fight against banditry in parts of the northwest and north central. The Minister of Defense, Bashir Magashi, disclosed this during Jumat prayers for fallen heroes to mark the 2021 Armed Forces Remembrance Day. The killings by the terrorists have continued unabated, while kidnappers have been abducting hundreds of Nigerians on a daily basis. So how feasible is this? The question is yours, Chike. Is it possible to end the insurgency in 2021?
Well, Ruben, because I know we are short for time, and the president's statement, I will just make a 1-minute submission. The president's statement tallies with everything I've always believed about insurgency, especially in the north. And he says he's going to end it in 2021. And I've always believed that if the leadership wants to end insurgency in Nigeria, they will end it. So the only reason why we have insurgency is because it is not, there is no political will to end it. So I'm very, very happy that, this is the highest level of leadership. This is the president of the country that has come out to say this. And I say, to God be the glory. That means we are coming to the end of this thing.
Yemi Adamolekun, over to you.
I actually quite disagree. It's not the first time he said it. So as far as I can tell, he has changed. His statement is the same. Our service chiefs are still our service chiefs. People are still being kidnapped or killed daily. And he's saying the same thing he's always said, but hasn't changed his posture, nor his attitude, nor the people who are going to do the work. So no expectations whatsoever.
Well, we lost connection with her there. Modele, let me come to you. Will insurgency end this year?
We hope so. But I have not seen anything concrete to tell me that it will. Been saying this for the past. The president has been saying this since he came into office. That insurgents. Well, he didn't give a timeline. Even on this occasion, he didn't give a timeline. Even though people are saying he gave a timeline that will end by the end of 2021. It's also instructive to note that this statement was actually made by General Magashi, the defense minister, on behalf of the president at the Armed Forces Remembrance Jumat service. So I'm taking it with a pinch of salt, because when you have a timeline, you should have a plan. That plan has not been put on the table as far as we know. The same things are being done. Well, let's not say that same things are being done. Only this weekend, the army redeployed about 1,000 senior officers in a major shakeup. So maybe that signals that something is being done and it is unfolding gradually. So we can only keep our fingers crossed and pray that it does end. But it's gone on for too long. And as Chike said, when there's political will, we might be able to see the end of this.
Well, Prof, one of the major fallouts in all of this is Professor Wole Soyinka being quoted as having said that Nigeria should consider the engagement of soldiers of fortune to be able to make concrete headway with the war against terror in Nigeria. What do you think of that? Do you think if the federal government adopts that option, do you think it will help to accelerate the war against banditry, terrorism, and ensure victory?
Modele believes there is goodness in hope. You can hope, but hoping for what?
Is there no goodness in hope?
You see, yes, we need to differentiate between a declaration and an intention. Intention falls within the framework of what Chike had done. He talked about political will. That's the intention. The intention cannot be said to be there. It's more or less of a declaration, and this brings me to the school of thought of Yemi. We are always together in this case because Mr. President has always been telling us the same thing, the same way, every time. From technical defeat, we are now coming again to say we are going to have a final something. Look, please, from the perspective of polymology, we ask 2 or 3 questions. The first question is, what are the new dynamics of the new statement, declaration, to make it, make people of Nigeria believe that Mr. President is now serious? There's no change in the dynamics. They're still the same thing. Now, I ask this question, what is Nigeria's policy on France? For instance, France, of recent, just last week, was accused of aiding and abetting the Boko Haramis, for instance. Wole Soyinka, for instance, has suggested that there should be need for Nigerian government to seek foreign help. And in particular, he talked about mercenaries, technically referred to as soldiers of fortune. In this case, I do not see how bringing in mercenaries will help. I cannot see how foreign countries will come and bring an enduring solution to it. Why? The foreign countries you are capitalizing on are basically the same countries that have said to be aiding and abetting the same Boko Haram. The record is there. Now, what is the policy? What is the attitudinal disposition of President Muhamadu Buhari on existing solutions to this issue of insurrection? I have always referred to Muammar Gaddafi on this platform. He believes, and I quote him again, he said, there will never, underscore the word never, there will never be any solution to Nigeria's problem until Nigeria is divided into Muslim North and Christian South. Well, that is one something.
Nigerians don't agree with
No, I agree. Look, academic suggestion. I do not necessarily agree or disagree with him. I'm telling you, people, the stakeholders that have been involved, that's what he told us. Jerry Rawlings told us that, look, if you are to find any solution, enduring solution to Nigeria's problem, you must do away with all the colonialist put government agents there. On
that note, Prof, let me bring in Yemi Adamolekun to have the last word on this subject. Yemi, quickly, we have just about a minute to go.
No, and as Prof has just said, I'm not even taking it with a grain of salt. I don't believe it at all. Mr. President, even though it was the Chief of Defense that was speaking on his behalf, he hasn't come out to say he lied. So let's just assume that the military architecture, this is what they are communicating to Nigerians. But their words have meant nothing in the past, and I don't see the fact that, as he said, there's no plan. Nothing has changed. We still have the same service chiefs who should have been fired for not being able to do their job. So I don't know how we're expecting anything to suddenly change.
Well, thank you very much, Yemi Adamolekun, Professor Akinterewa, Modele Sharafa Yusuf, and Chike Ogea. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati from my entire team here in Lagos. It's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.